Hi, and welcome to the first lesson of Introduction to HTML and CSS. This will give you a really good foundation for what HTML is and how it's different than CSS. So in this one, we won't actually start coding anything, but this will give you, I think, a good baseline for what you're in for in terms of this course. So as we'll do with every video, we'll walk through kind of what I hope you'll learn by the end of the video. So first, I hope you'll understand what HTML is and what it does. Second, you'll be able to differentiate HTML from CSS. I think that's sort of the most important component of this tutorial. And then finally, hopefully you'll feel less intimidated by HTML and by coding in general. So those are the three learning outcomes or objectives. Again, as we'll do in every video, what you'll need for this lesson, all you'll need is a web browser. So something that you use to view websites on. This can be Chrome, Safari, Edge, Firefox. Any of those options will be really helpful. I prefer to use Chrome when doing development because they have a great extension or add-on called Web Developer. But I believe you can probably find that for some of these other browsers as well. So I'll be using Chrome, but you can kind of use the browser of your choice. So let's start with what HTML is. It is an acronym for Hypertext Markup Language. And the reason why that's important is that it's not a programming language. It's a markup language. So the differentiation between those two things might be a little bit confusing, but generally with the programming language, you can write scripts, you can introduce logic into the thing that you're programming. And in HTML, all you can do is you can describe the content. You're marking up the content. So that's the primary difference between a markup language and a programming language. HTML, you can't introduce things like if-then statements. You would need to use some kind of programming language to introduce that type of logic. So that's sort of the standard academic definition. But more specifically to its functionality, HTML describes the structure and the content of a web page. Okay, so it describes the structure and the content of a web page. In order to describe the content of the web page, it uses a finite library of elements. These elements are called tags. It uses a finite and universal library, meaning it's a standardized way of describing the content on a website. So for example, all websites have images on them, or most of them at least. There's a standardized image tag that all websites use. All websites have links on them. So there's a standardized anchor tag that all websites use. All websites have some kind of paragraph text. So there's a standardized paragraph tag that all websites use. So there's a quite extensive library of HTML elements. But as you'll see in sort of this next part of this lesson, most websites rely on, a small number of tags, and you don't need to master all that many to to really be able to build a functioning website. So I want to look at three examples: my own design website, the Apple website, and the New York Times website. And I'm going to use these three examples to really illustrate the difference between HTML and CSS. So I've got them pulled up here. So here is this website that I designed maybe 5 or 7 years ago. So it's in store for a redesign very soon. But this is the website that I use for my web design and development business. Pretty standard website. You can kind of click through and see that I've got my portfolio, I've got my, some websites that I've built, description of those websites, etc. And a way to contact me, of course, if you want to hire me. So pretty standard web portfolio, pretty standard sort of web design components too, right? So we've got this hero section, we've got buttons here that will take us to other places. We've got a 3-column layout here. And then we've got this testimonial slider that sort of slides through a variety of testimonials that I've received from prior clients. So pretty standard, but one cool thing we can do with the Chrome Web Developer extension is we can actually disable all the styles and see this is what a raw HTML document would look like if it were opened or rendered in the web browser. So as you can see, we lose the columns, we lose the colors, all of the fonts are just black, and they're using the default Times New Roman font. But you'll notice that it's just a series of elements, HTML elements, right? So for example, this is a anchor tag or a link tag. These are heading tags. This is an image tag. This is a paragraph tag. And this is an ordered list tag, right? So, you know, with maybe 5 or 7 HTML tags, I've designed or built this entire homepage of my website. So you can kind of see, you know, it can feel a little bit overwhelming, all of these different tags, but really there's sort of a base kind of number of tags that you'll use on any given website. Another cool thing you can do is you can actually view the raw HTML. This is what we'll eventually code in this course. And you'll be able to see some of these tags and what they look like. Don't worry if this feels a little bit overwhelming, but you'll see things like an A tag here, which stands for an anchor tag. Or you'll see things like an image tag right here, which again will describe or mark up the image, or things like an unordered list tag or a bulleted list tag that has different list items in them. Okay, so this is eventually the kinds of HTML that we'll code in this course. We can do the same thing for the Apple website, right? So here's the Apple website, pretty minimalistic modern grid design. And we can go to Web Developer and we can disable all styles again. And it looks eerily similar to my site with no styles. Again, we have a list of links here. That's typically how we create navigation bars in websites. We've got headings, we've got paragraph tags, we've got link tags. So very similar to my website. And we can do the same thing with the New York Times site. So here's the New York Times site, your standard sort of newspaper layout, multiple columns, lots of headings, lots of images, lots of links, things like that. And we can disable the styles again, and we can see it looks very similar to the previous two examples. We've got lists of links, images, things like that, more images, more links, etc. Okay, so the whole point of this was to kind of give you an idea of how HTML and CSS differ. So if we jump back in here, we can see that HTML describes and defines the structure and content, okay? Structure and content of a website. And all HTML files have an extension, a file extension of .html. That's very similar to, for example, a file extension of a Microsoft Word document, right? So a Word document has an extension of .docx, D-O-C-X, and that can be opened in a software program called Microsoft Word. Similarly, any file with a file extension of .html can be opened in the proper software. And in this case, the proper software is a browser, right? Safari, Chrome, Edge, whatever browser you use to view web pages. CSS, on the other hand, describes and defines the layout and the visual design of a website, right? So if we jump back into our first example, this is just HTML with no CSS. It's describing the structure and content of our website. But if we turn HTML back on, we can see things like color, font sizing, fonts, layout, like columns, right? We have 3 columns now. Designs for our links to make them look like buttons. And so CSS gives us the ability to really make the HTML, the content, look visually distinct in some way. CSS, unlike HTML, cannot be rendered in a browser. So if you opened a file with a .css extension, it won't just open in a web browser and make it look like a website. Instead, we need to connect or link our CSS file with a corresponding HTML file, right? So at the bare minimum, every website's got at least 2 files. One is your HTML file, and the second would be your CSS file that controls your design elements. So that was the whole, the main sort of takeaway that I want you to have is how to be able to differentiate HTML from CSS. What we'll do in the next video is we'll create our first HTML file, and we'll learn a few of the basic HTML elements or tags, and we'll actually view that outputted onto in a web browser and take a look at what that will look like. So thanks for your attention. We'll see you in the next video. I look forward to building a beautiful website with you. So until next time, see you later.